Welcome to the Personal History Hub. In this video, we're going to be looking at the why do the interpretations differ question. So this is the fifth question on paper 3, but it's actually 3C because they're broken down into little component parts, and it's worth 4 marks as well. So just like the last one, it's also worth 4 marks. It's the third in a series of linked questions. So they're all based around 2 interpretations and 2 sources. So I've already done the one on how do they differ. So that will be in the same playlist as this, and then this one will follow on. Okay, so this is the second one in that little series. So let's have a look at an example that we can work through together. The example we're going to be looking at suggests one reason why interpretations 1 and 2 give different views about the causes of the urban riots of the 1960s. You may use the sources A and B to help explain your answer. So this is quite similar wording to the last question, to question 3B, except as I've underlined here, it says one reason why they differ rather than how they differ. So we're looking for the reason. So if in the first question we spotted the difference, now in this one we're looking for the reason behind that difference. Okay, and it also tells us at the end, you may use the sources A and B to help explain your answer. Well, I would say that these questions are worded just a little bit misleading, because instead of you may use, I would definitely use. Okay, it's important that you definitely use sources A and B to help you explain your answer. Okay, let's just quickly read the bottom bit of the mark scheme as well, this bit down here. So it says an explanation of a reason for the difference is given by analysing both interpretations. So we've got, once again, we have to use both interpretations. It does say both sources are also used. So never mind all of this you may use, you have to use the sources to support your reasoning of the difference in views. You're basically saying, I've already told you how they differ in the first question. I'm going to tell you that again, but give you a reason behind it this time. It says the explanation is well explained and argued. So a couple of top tips before we get going with this question. So you must still focus on differences, okay? So even though, yes, we're bringing in the sources and we're thinking about why they differ, at the end of the day, it's still differences, okay? So build on what you've already said in question 3B. Use that as your starting point. Okay? And then once again, you must use the sources. You have to quote both the interpretations and the sources as well. Okay? So we're quoting the sources this time as well as the interpretations. And once again, do not use any own knowledge. So this is purely, we don't use the own knowledge until the 16 marker of this kind of series of questions in these 3 questions. Okay, so no own knowledge, we're just using sources and interpretation this time. So let's have a look at the interpretations and sources in more detail. So these, we should be familiar with these interpretations because we already used these ones in the last question, but we're now going to have a look at the sources which we didn't look at properly last time. So just to recap, so that you remember, a source is a first-hand account or an original historical document, whereas an interpretation is a historian's view on something. They have analysed and written about an event that they did not have personal experience of, and they often use sources to reach their judgment. Okay, so we're going to be using these sources as our kind of reasoning why the historians have said what they've said in the interpretations. So here they are. So we've read interpretation 1 and 2 in the last video, so I'm not going to read them out to you. If you want to, though, you can pause the video and you can reread them again yourself. So I'm going to read the sources this time. So source A, down here on the left-hand side, is part of the Black Panther Party manifesto in October 1966. It says, we want full employment for our people. We believe that the federal government is responsible and obliged to give every man employment or a guaranteed income. We believe that if the white American businessman will not give full employment, then the means of production should be taken from the businessman and placed in the community, so that the people of the community can organise and employ all of its people and give high standard of living. Number 4, we want decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings. We believe that if the white landlords will not give decent housing to our black community, then the housing and the land should be made into cooperatives, so that our community with government aid can build and make decent housing for its people. And so that's source A. And then source B is written by Stokely Carmichael, so you might be familiar with his name, he's a civil rights activist as well. Wrote it in New York in a review of books in the 22nd of September 1966. So he says, in a sense, I blame ourselves, together with the mass media, for what has happened in the riots in Watts, Harlem, Chicago, Cleveland, and Omaha. Each time the people in those cities saw Martin Luther King get slapped, they became angry. When they saw 4 little black girls bombed to death, they were angrier. And when nothing happened, they were steaming. We had nothing to offer that they could see except to go and be beaten again. We helped to build their frustration. Okay. So now that we've read the interpretations and the sources, this is what I would physically do in your exam as well. Before we even attempt to answer this question, we must match the correct interpretation to the correct source. So as we said before, interpretations are always based on historical sources. So you'll always get one of your sources will match to the interpretation. So the interpretation will be based around that source or will have the same view as that source. The other interpretation will have the same view as, be based on, have given weight to the other source. Okay, so I would physically do this on your exam paper by drawing an arrow between before you even start answering the question. Okay, so you go to it in your exam booklet and you can physically match them up with arrows. So interpretation 1 matches up with source B, because in 1 it's suggesting that it's the kind of failings, the non-violent civil rights movement that led to the Watts riots, and that's pretty much a very similar message as to what Stokely Carmichael is giving in source B. He's saying that it's their fault, that they didn't do enough, they kept seeing King having issues, they became angrier. And therefore, interpretation 2, which is more talking about unemployment, poverty, poor standards of living, matches to A, okay, because that's giving the same message as well. The Black Panthers are saying we want full employment, we want a better standard of living, we want better housing. So they match, that one matches to that one. Okay, so in your exam paper, physically draw that arrow. Okay, it's the best way to do it. Okay, let's have a go then at answering this question. So, like we've done last time and several times in these videos now, I'll do one as an example, then you can have a go at the second one. So you must always begin by using this phrase. So this is another little top tip for you as well. If you completely run out of time on this exam and you've purposely left these 4 markers last, okay, what I would physically write, or you're thinking time's pushing on, I just want to get onto the 16 marker, just write this one sentence, okay, and then you can always come back to this question. You must always begin by using this phrase. The interpretations differ because they have given weight to different sources, and that phrase have given weight to basically means they have given more importance to, they've placed more importance on one source over the other. So like we already matched up, didn't we, interpretation 1 to source B, so interpretation 1 has given weight to source B because it's given more importance to source B. It's based itself around what B is saying. Okay, so always start with that one. Then here's my example for interpretation 1. So I've said, for example, interpretation 1 suggests the cause of the riots was the lack of progress in the non-violent civil rights movement. I know this because in the interpretation it says many African Americans refused to accept Martin Luther King's call for non-violence, suggesting that they had become angry at King's methods. So that blue bit is basically what we've already done in question 3B. So save yourself some time. Instead of looking for a difference, okay, something new to write about, use what you've already said in 3B. It's there for you. Okay, you don't want to waste your time. Copy it over, use the same difference again. Okay, then what we have to do that's different in this question is matching it to the correct source and giving some evidence that it matches, so quoting the source. Okay, so this red bit is new. We didn't do this bit in question 3B. So it says this supports source B because it also talks about the cause of the riot being to do with black frustration with Martin Luther King's non-violent approach. It states that when nothing happened, they were steaming and riots breaking out. The author of Interpretation 1 has clearly given weight to source B. Okay, I would also just finish with that phrase just to show the examiner that you really know what you're talking about, that you've managed to match them up successfully. Okay, so that's what we need to do. So the blue bit at the top here is exactly the same as what we did in the last question, but now we're just adding on this red bit. So we're matching it to one of the sources this time. Okay, so we're still stating our difference and quoting the interpretation, then we match to the source. So I think it's, to be honest, I think it's a little bit harsh that this is a 4-mark question because you're actually being asked to do more than you were on the last one, but that's just how it is. So why don't you have a go now at doing the same thing for interpretation, I should say 2, sorry, using source A. So you could use this sentence structure. So you'll say, on the other hand, interpretation 2 provides some support for source. Well, we matched it to A, so we know it's source A. Interpretation 2 suggests that the cause of the riots was, so use what we did on the last question. So paraphrase it and then quote interpretation 2. Then you can say this supports source A because the source suggests that the cause of the riots was. Okay, and again, do a bit of quoting from source A. Then I would finish off by saying, ultimately, the author of interpretation 2 has placed greater weight on source A. So I will leave at the bottom of the screen for you source A and interpretation 2, so you can have a look at them. So why don't you pause the video and have a go at doing that second bit of the paragraph. Okay, so this is what I got then. So this is the full model answer for this question. So you can put it all together in one big paragraph because it's only a 4-marker. We don't need to be writing loads and loads and loads. Just try and squish it in as much as you can. So this top bit here, this first blue bit, is the bit that we've already done. Same for this red bit. Okay, so that was interpretation 1 and source B. Down here, this is the bit that you should have just done now as well. So again, this blue bit, use what you've already done on question 3B on the previous question. I just copied that bit out again. So on the other hand, interpretation 2 suggests that the causes of the riots were due to the poor living conditions in the slums and ghettos, as it states that people were oppressed by the poverty of the slums and often unemployment. Then we need to do this new bit, this red bit at the bottom, by matching it to source A. So we say this has given weight to source A, in which the Black Panther Party are demanding decent housing and full employment. The sources differ, therefore, because the authors of both interpretations has clearly given weight to different sources. So just reinforce your point at the end with the given weight to different sources. Okay, so why don't you have a go at doing some other examples yourself at home using the same method. And don't forget to subscribe to the Pre-Snow History Hub.